The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the weathered timber building, and Owen Thornton watched through the frosted window as a woman in a worn traveling cloak stepped down into the ankle-deep snow, clutching a bundle that wailed against the howling December wind. He had expected a mail-order bride today, expected nervousness and perhaps some regret in her eyes when she saw the harsh wilderness of Oregon City. But he had not expected the infant whose cries cut through the bitter cold of that 1867 afternoon like a knife through his carefully constructed plans. Owen pushed away from the desk, where he had been pretending to review ledgers for the better part of an hour, his heart hammering beneath his wool shirt and leather vest. He had written to the marriage agency in Boston 6 months ago, explaining his situation with careful honesty. He was 26 years old, owned a profitable cattle ranch 5 miles outside Oregon City, and needed a wife to help build a life in this unforgiving territory. The letters he had received in return from Miss Penelope Preston had been polite, reserved, intelligent. She wrote of her love for books, her skill with numbers, her willingness to work hard in exchange for security and respect. Not once had she mentioned a child. The door swung open, bringing a gust of snow and freezing air into the stage office. The woman stepped inside, and Owen got his first real look at his intended bride. Penelope Preston was younger than he had imagined, perhaps 22 or 23, with dark hair escaping from beneath her hood and eyes the color of storm clouds over the Pacific. Those eyes found his immediately, and he saw in them a desperate mixture of fear, exhaustion, and something else he could not quite name. The baby in her arms continued to cry, a thin, hungry sound that made his chest tighten. "Mr. Thornton." Her voice was hoarse, probably from days of travel, but it carried a strength that surprised him. "Yes, madam." Owen crossed the room in 3 long strides, removing his hat out of habit. "You must be Miss Preston." "I am." She swayed slightly on her feet, and he reached out instinctively to steady her elbow. "I must explain about the baby. I know I should have written, but there was not time, and I was afraid you would refuse me, and I had nowhere else to go." The station manager was watching them with undisguised curiosity, and Owen could already imagine how quickly this story would spread through Oregon City. The telegraph operator would hear it by evening, and by tomorrow morning, every rancher and shopkeeper within 20 miles would know that Owen Thornton's mail-order bride had arrived with an unexplained infant. "Let's get you somewhere warm," Owen said, making a decision in that moment that would change everything. "We can talk at my hotel room. I keep one in town for when the weather makes the ranch unreachable." Penelope nodded gratefully, and Owen collected her single battered trunk from the stagecoach driver. The bag of mail that had arrived with her sat forgotten on the station floor as he guided her out into the snow, one hand hovering near her back in case she stumbled. The baby had quieted to soft whimpers, and when Owen glanced down, he saw a tiny face peeking out from the blankets, red from crying but undeniably perfect. "2 blessings came today," he murmured, not quite meaning to say it aloud. Penelope's head snapped toward him, those gray eyes wide with shock. "What did you say?" Owen felt heat rise in his face despite the cold. "I just meant that you both arrived safely. That's a blessing, given the weather and the journey." She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because her shoulders relaxed slightly and she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton, for not turning us away immediately." "Owen," he said. "And I would not turn away anyone in this weather, let alone a woman and a child who have traveled 2,000 miles to get here." The Oregon City Hotel was a modest establishment, but it was clean and warm, and the proprietor, Mrs. Hadley, took one look at Penelope's pale face and immediately began fussing. Within minutes, she had hot coffee and fresh bread brought to Owen's room, along with a basin of warm water and clean towels. The older woman cast curious glances at the baby, but had the good grace not to ask questions in front of the exhausted travelers. Once they were alone, Owen pulled the room's single chair closer to the fire and gestured for Penelope to sit. She did, sinking into it with visible relief, and began to unwrap the layers of blankets from the infant. The baby was a girl, Owen saw, perhaps 4 or 5 months old, with wispy dark hair and eyes that were still the murky blue of early infancy. "Her name is Lily," Penelope said softly, running a gentle finger over the baby's cheek. "She is my sister's child. My sister Ruth died 3 weeks after giving birth, childbed fever, and the father was already gone, killed in a factory accident before Ruth even knew she was pregnant." Owen lowered himself to sit on the edge of the bed, the only other furniture in the small room. "I am sorry for your loss. We had no other family." Penelope's voice was steady, but Owen could hear the grief beneath it. "Ruth and I were orphaned 5 years ago when our parents died of influenza. We made our way as seamstresses in Boston, but the work was hard and the pay was poor. When Ruth died, I knew I could not keep Lily and continue working. The landlady was threatening to throw us out, and there were people suggesting I give Lily to an orphanage." Her arms tightened protectively around the baby. "I could not do that. She is all I have left of Ruth, and I promised my sister I would care for her daughter." "So you answered my advertisement," Owen said, understanding beginning to dawn. "I answered several advertisements," Penelope admitted. "Yours was the only one that seemed honest. You did not promise wealth or luxury. You said you needed a partner, someone willing to work beside you to build something lasting. That was what I needed too. But I knew that if I told you about Lily, you would refuse me. What man wants to take on another man's child when seeking a wife?" Owen thought about that. She was right, of course. Most men in his position would have sent her back on the next stage. Children were a blessing when they were your own, but taking on the responsibility of another man's baby was asking a great deal. And yet, as he looked at the tiny girl in Penelope's arms, at the fierce love in the mother's eyes, he found he could not imagine turning them away. "You must be hungry," he said instead of answering directly. "And Lily needs feeding too, I imagine." Relief flooded Penelope's face at his practical response. "Yes, I have been rationing what little money I had for the journey. There is some goat's milk in my bag. A kind woman on the train helped me acquire it. Lily is old enough to drink from a cup with help." Owen retrieved the bottle from her trunk and watched as Penelope expertly fed the baby, murmuring soft reassurances. He used the time to think, to consider what he was about to propose. His ranch was successful but demanding. He ran 300 head of cattle with the help of 4 ranch hands, and the work was never ending. He had wanted a wife to share the burden, to help with the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. Cooking, preserving food, managing supplies, keeping accounts, tending the chickens and the garden. Could Penelope do all that with a baby to care for? But there was something else too, something he had not written in his letters to the marriage agency, because he had not known how to put it into words. He was tired of being alone. Tired of eating silent dinners in the ranch house his father had built. Tired of having no one to talk to except hired men who were friendly but not friends. He wanted someone to share his life with, to build a future with. And looking at Penelope now, at the strength in her bearing despite her obvious exhaustion, he thought perhaps she might be exactly what he had been searching for. "I have a proposal," he said when Lily had finished eating and was dozing against Penelope's shoulder. The marriage we discussed in our letters, it still stands if you want it. You and Lily both." Penelope's hand stilled where it had been gently patting the baby's back. "You would take us both." "I would. But I need to be honest with you about what life at the ranch will be like. It is isolated. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away. The work is hard, especially in winter. You will be expected to contribute to pull your weight, and Lily will need to be cared for while you do that. It will not be easy." "Nothing in my life has been easy," Penelope said quietly. "But I am not afraid of hard work. I can cook and clean and keep accounts. I can sew and preserve food. I can learn anything else you need me to learn. And I will find a way to manage Lily and still be useful to you." Owen nodded slowly. "There is one more thing we need to discuss. The marriage itself. I am not expecting a love match, not right away. We are strangers. But I believe in treating people with respect and kindness. I will not force myself on you. We can take our time getting to know each other before sharing a bed." Color rose in Penelope's cheeks, but she met his eyes steadily. "That is more than fair, more than I had hoped for, to be honest. Some men would not be so considerate. Then we have an agreement." Owen extended his hand, feeling the solemnity of the moment. Penelope shifted Lily to one arm and placed her hand in his. Her palm was rough with calluses, the hand of someone who had indeed worked hard all her life. "We have an agreement." They were married 2 days later in the small church on the edge of Oregon City, with Mrs. Hadley and the minister's wife as witnesses. Penelope wore a simple dress of dark blue wool that Mrs. Hadley had helped her press, and Owen wore his best suit, the one he usually reserved for Christmas and Easter services. Lily, wrapped in a clean white blanket that one of the church women had donated, slept through the ceremony in Mrs. Hadley's arms. The minister, Reverend Calloway, had raised his eyebrows when Owen explained the situation privately before the ceremony, but he had not refused to perform the marriage. Oregon Territory was a place where people reinvented themselves, where questions about the past were considered impolite. If Owen Thornton wanted to marry a woman with a baby, that was his business. "Do you, Owen Marcus Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Reverend Calloway intoned, "I do." Owen's voice was steady as he looked into Penelope's nervous face. "And do you, Penelope Grace Preston, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." Her voice was softer than his, but just as certain. "Then by the power vested in me by Oregon Territory and the Lord Almighty, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Thornton." Owen had thought about this moment, had wondered if it would be awkward or forced. But when he leaned down and pressed his lips gently to Penelope's, he felt something shift inside him. Her mouth was soft and warm, and she smelled faintly of the lavender soap Mrs. Hadley had provided. It was a brief kiss, proper and chaste, but it sent a warmth through his chest that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the church's stove. When they pulled apart, Penelope's cheeks were pink, but she was smiling. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. They spent that night at the hotel, in separate rooms that Owen paid for without comment. Penelope was still exhausted from her journey, and Lily had developed a slight cough that worried them both. Mrs. Hadley brought up hot milk with honey and assured them that it was just the dry winter air affecting the baby's throat, nothing serious. But Owen could see the fear in his new wife's eyes every time the baby coughed, and he understood. Lily was all Penelope had left of her family. Losing her would be unbearable. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of brilliant winter day that made the snow sparkle like diamonds. Owen loaded their few belongings into the wagon he had brought from the ranch, along with supplies he had purchased from the general store. Flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, cured ham, and a dozen other necessities that would see them through the rest of winter. He also bought fabric for new dresses for Penelope, soft flannel for baby clothes, and a wooden rattle that had caught his eye in the store window. "You did not need to buy so much," Penelope protested as he added a new wool cloak to the pile. "I can make do with what I have." "You are my wife now," Owen said, and the word felt strange and right in his mouth. "It is my job to provide for you and Lily. Besides, that cloak you came in is falling apart at the seams." Penelope touched the soft wool of the new cloak reverently. "Thank you, Owen. You have been far kinder than I had any right to expect." The ride to the ranch took nearly 2 hours, the wagon moving slowly through the snow-packed roads. Owen had heated bricks and wrapped them in blankets for Penelope and Lily to rest their feet on, but even so, he could see them both shivering by the time the ranch house came into view. The house was large by frontier standards, a solid 2-story structure built from timber and stone. Smoke curled from the chimney, evidence that one of the ranch hands had started the fires as Owen had requested. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and in the distance, he could see the dark shapes of cattle moving slowly through the snow-covered pastures. "It is beautiful," Penelope breathed, staring at the house with something like wonder in her eyes. Owen tried to see it through her eyes. To him, it was just home, the place he had lived for most of his life. But he supposed to someone who had been living in a cramped boarding house in Boston, it must seem spacious and grand. "My father built it 15 years ago. He and my mother homesteaded this land when I was a boy. They both died 3 years back, influenza, like your parents. I have been running the place alone since then." "I am sorry," Penelope said softly. "It must be lonely." "It has been," Owen admitted, "but that is going to change now." He helped her down from the wagon, then carefully took Lily while Penelope found her footing in the snow. The baby was awake now, her blue eyes staring up at him with unfocused curiosity. Owen found himself smiling down at her, touching one tiny hand with his rough finger. Lily's fingers immediately closed around his, gripping with surprising strength. "Strong grip," he murmured. "That is good. She will need that out here." Inside, the house was warm and welcoming. The main room served as kitchen and living space, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. A sturdy wooden table and chairs occupied the center of the room, and cupboards lined the walls. A doorway led to a back room that Owen used as an office, and a staircase climbed to the second floor where the bedrooms were located. "I use the large bedroom at the front," Owen said, setting Penelope's trunk down near the stairs. "There are 2 other rooms. I thought you and Lily could take the room next to mine, at least for now. It has a good fireplace and gets morning sun." Penelope nodded, looking around the space with an expression Owen could not quite read. "It is much more than I expected. You have a lovely home, Owen." "Our home," he corrected gently. "Yours and mine and Lily's now." He showed her the rest of the house, pointing out where things were kept and explaining the daily routines. The ranch hands, 4 men ranging in age from 18 to 50, lived in the bunkhouse near the barn. They took their midday meal in the main house, which meant Penelope would be cooking for 6 adults every day. Breakfast and supper they managed for themselves, but Owen warned her they would often show up for coffee and fresh bread if she was inclined to bake. "They are good men," he assured her. "Respectful. I would not tolerate anything else, but I know it might be strange having so many men around at first." "I worked in a factory for a year when Ruth was pregnant," Penelope said. "I am accustomed to being around men. As long as they behave themselves, we will get along fine." That evening, Owen introduced Penelope to the ranch hands. The men removed their hats and shuffled their feet nervously as they filed into the kitchen for coffee, and the stew Penelope had managed to put together despite her exhaustion. There was Jacob, the oldest, a weathered man with silver in his beard who had worked for Owen's father. Thomas and Samuel were brothers in their mid-20s, strong and hardworking though not overly bright. And then there was Charlie, barely 18, gangly and shy, who blushed furiously when Penelope smiled at him. "Welcome, madam," Jacob said, speaking for all of them. "It is good to have a woman's touch around the place again, and the little one too. She is a pretty baby." "Thank you," Penelope said, bouncing Lily gently on her hip. "I hope we will not be too much of a disruption to your routines." "No disruption at all, madam," Thomas assured her. "It will be nice to have decent cooking again. No offense, boss." Owen snorted. "None taken. I know my cooking is barely edible." The men ate quickly and efficiently, thanking Penelope profusely for the meal before heading back to the bunkhouse. When they were gone, Owen helped Penelope clean up, noting with approval how naturally they fell into a rhythm together. She washed while he dried, and they worked in comfortable silence broken only by Lily's occasional babbling from where she lay in a nest of blankets near the fire. "You should rest," Owen said when the last dish was put away. "It has been a long few days." Penelope nodded, visibly wilting now that the demands of the day were over. "Will you show me the bedroom?" Owen led her upstairs, carrying Lily while Penelope brought the bag with the baby's things. The room he had prepared was indeed lovely, with a large bed covered in quilts his mother had made, a sturdy dresser, and a cradle that Owen had brought down from the attic and cleaned until it gleamed. A fire burned cheerfully in the small fireplace, making the room warm and cozy. "The cradle was mine," Owen said, suddenly shy, "and my father's before me. I hope you do not mind that it is old." "Mind?" Penelope's voice was thick with emotion. "Owen, it is perfect. All of this is perfect. I cannot believe this is real." She turned to face him, and he saw tears streaming down her cheeks. Without thinking, Owen stepped forward and gathered her into his arms, careful not to crush Lily between them. Penelope buried her face against his chest and cried silently, her shoulders shaking. "It is all right," Owen murmured, stroking her hair awkwardly. "You are safe now, both of you, I promise you that." "I was so frightened," Penelope whispered. "On the journey here, I kept thinking about what I would do if you refused us. I had just enough money left for food for a few days. Not enough for passage back to Boston, even if I had anywhere to go there. I thought we would end up on the streets or that I would have to give Lily to an orphanage after all." "That will never happen," Owen said fiercely. "You are my wife, and Lily is part of my family now. I take care of my family." Penelope pulled back slightly, looking up at him with wet, grateful eyes. "How can you be so kind to two strangers?" "You are not strangers anymore," Owen said simply. "You are my wife and daughter. That makes all the difference." The word daughter had slipped out without him meaning it, but once it was said, Owen realized it felt right. Lily might not be his blood, but she was his responsibility now, his to protect and provide for. That made her his daughter in every way that mattered. Penelope must have heard it too, because she smiled through her tears. "Daughter. Yes, thank you, Owen, for everything." He left her to settle in for the night, retreating to his own room with a strange lightness in his chest. He had gone from being alone to being a husband and father in the space of a few days, and the change should have been terrifying. Instead, he felt like something that had been missing from his life had finally clicked into place. Sleep came easily that night, and Owen dreamed of spring, of green grass and warm sunshine, of Penelope laughing while Lily chased butterflies through wildflowers. When he woke, he could hear the soft sounds of his wife moving around in the next room, humming a lullaby to the baby. He lay in bed for a moment, just listening, and felt grateful in a way he had not felt in years. The next weeks fell into a pattern that felt both strange and comfortable. Owen rose before dawn to handle the animals and check on the cattle with his ranch hands. Penelope woke with Lily, fed her, and then set about making breakfast for everyone. She proved to be an excellent cook, far better than Owen had expected, and the ranch hands began arriving earlier and earlier for morning coffee and fresh biscuits. "You are going to make them fat and lazy," Owen teased one morning, watching Thomas eat his fourth biscuit slathered in butter and jam. "Cannot help it if the lady cooks like an angel," Thomas said with his mouth full, earning a swat on the arm from his brother. "Mind your manners," Samuel hissed. "That is the boss's wife you are talking about." But Penelope just laughed, clearly pleased by the compliment. Owen noticed that she seemed to relax more each day, losing some of the hunted, desperate look she had carried when she first arrived. She moved through the house with growing confidence, rearranging things to suit her needs, adding small touches that made it feel more like a home. Curtains appeared in the windows, sewn from fabric Owen had bought. Fresh bread was always cooling on the counter. The smell of herbs hung in the air from where she had started drying them in bunches from the ceiling beams. Lily was thriving too. The cough had disappeared after a few days, and the baby was gaining weight, her cheeks growing plump and rosy. She was a happy child, quick to smile and laugh, and Owen found himself spending more and more time playing with her in the evenings. He would lie on the floor in front of the fire, making faces at her until she giggled, that sweet baby laugh that made his heart clench. "You are good with her," Penelope observed one evening, sitting in the rocking chair and watching them with a soft smile. "She makes it easy," Owen said, tickling Lily's round belly gently. "She is a sweet-tempered baby." "Ruth was sweet-tempered too," Penelope said quietly. "I see so much of my sister in her. The shape of her eyes, the way she smiles. It comforts me and breaks my heart at the same time." Owen sat up, lifting Lily into his lap. "Tell me about Ruth. What was she like?" Penelope's face brightened, and she began to talk about her sister. Ruth had been 3 years younger, optimistic where Penelope was practical, dreamy where Penelope was grounded. She had fallen in love with a young man named Daniel who worked at the same factory where Penelope sewed buttonholes. Daniel had been kind and hardworking, planning to marry Ruth as soon as he had saved enough money. But then the accident had happened, a boiler explosion that killed 3 men instantly. Ruth had been devastated, and when she discovered she was pregnant 2 months later, she had been terrified. "I promised her I would help raise the baby," Penelope said, her voice catching. "We made plans. We would pool our money, find a better room, make it work somehow. But then the pregnancy was difficult and the birth was worse. The midwife said Ruth had lost too much blood. She died 3 days after Lily was born, never really recovering consciousness." "That must have been terrible," Owen said quietly. "It was the worst thing I have ever experienced," Penelope admitted. "Worse even than losing our parents because at least they went together." "Ruth died alone and in pain and too young. She was only 20 years old, Owen. She should have had her whole life ahead of her." Owen reached out and took Penelope's hand, squeezing it gently. They sat like that for a long moment, connected by their shared understanding of loss. Both of them had buried people they loved. Both of them knew the hollow ache of grief. "Lily will know about her mother," Penelope said finally. "I will make sure of it. I will tell her stories about Ruth, about how kind and loving she was. I will not let her forget." "We will tell her together," Owen said, and Penelope's eyes widened slightly at his use of we. "She should know about her father too. Daniel deserves to be remembered." "Yes," Penelope whispered. "Yes, he does. Thank you, Owen." As January turned to February, the relationship between Owen and Penelope deepened. They talked in the evenings after the chores were done, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Owen told her about his parents, about how his father had taught him everything about ranching, about how his mother had been the one who insisted he learn to read and write properly. She said there was no excuse for ignorance, even on the frontier, Owen said with a fond smile. She ordered books from back east and made me read them aloud to her while she sewed. I hated it at the time, but now I am grateful. I see too many men out here who can barely sign their names. Ruth and I taught ourselves to read better after our parents died, Penelope said. We knew education was our only hope of getting better work. We would go to the public library on Sundays and read everything we could find. You like books then? Owen asked, an idea forming. I love them, Penelope admitted, but I have not had a new book to read in over a year. They were a luxury I could not afford. The next time Owen went into Oregon City for supplies, he stopped by the small bookshop near the church. The selection was limited, but he bought 3 books he thought Penelope might enjoy. A volume of poetry, a novel about life in England, and a practical book about herb gardening. When he presented them to her that evening, she looked at him with such joy that he felt like he had given her diamonds instead of second-hand books. You remembered, she breathed, running her hands over the covers reverently. Of course I remembered, Owen said, pleased by her reaction. You are my wife. I pay attention to the things that make you happy. That night after Lily was asleep, Penelope came to where Owen sat by the fire and kissed his cheek softly. You are a good man, Owen Thornton. I am lucky to have found you. Owen turned his head slightly, and their lips met in a kiss that was longer and deeper than the one they had shared at their wedding. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing harder, and Owen could feel his heart pounding. Penelope, he started, but she pressed her fingers to his lips. Not yet, she said softly, but soon. I promise you soon. February brought a break in the weather, several days of warmer temperatures that melted some of the snow and gave them all a hint of the spring to come. Owen took advantage of the clear weather to ride out with his men and check on the cattle more thoroughly. They had lost a few head to the harsh winter, which was expected, but overall the herd was healthy. While Owen was out, Penelope threw herself into deep cleaning the house. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, beat rugs until the dust flew. Lily watched from a blanket on the floor, entertained by the activity. By the time Owen returned, the house smelled of lye soap and lemon oil, and everything sparkled. You did not need to work so hard, Owen protested, seeing how tired Penelope looked. I wanted to, she said, pushing a strand of hair back from her face. This is my home now. I want to take care of it properly. Owen pulled her into his arms, not caring that she was dusty from her cleaning. You take such good care of all of us, but you need to take care of yourself too. I am fine, Penelope assured him. Just tired. It was good work though, satisfying. That evening, Owen insisted on cooking supper himself, refusing to let Penelope do anything more strenuous than sitting in the rocking chair with Lily. His cooking was still far inferior to hers, but she ate the fried potatoes and ham without complaint, even claiming to enjoy it. You are a terrible liar, Owen said with a grin, but I appreciate the effort. It was not that bad, Penelope insisted, though her eyes were twinkling with suppressed laughter. It was awful and we both know it, Owen said, but I am trying to make a point. You do not have to be perfect, Penelope. You do not have to work yourself to exhaustion to prove you deserve to be here. You are my wife. This is your home. You belong here simply because you exist. Penelope's eyes filled with tears, and she set down her fork with a shaking hand. I spent so many years feeling like I had to earn my place in the world. After our parents died, every landlady, every employer, every person who gave us work made it clear that Ruth and I were a burden, that we had to be grateful for whatever scraps we were given. It is hard to let go of that feeling. Owen moved his chair closer to hers and took both her hands in his. You are not a burden, not to me, not ever. You are a gift, Penelope. You and Lily both. I meant what I said the day you arrived. 2 blessings came that day, and I thank God for both of you every morning when I wake up. Owen. Penelope's voice broke on his name, and then she was leaning forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that held all the emotion neither of them could quite put into words. Owen kissed her back, cupping her face gently in his calloused hands, pouring years of loneliness and hope into that single moment of connection. When they broke apart, both of them were flushed and breathing hard. Lily, as if sensing the shift in the air between her 2 caretakers, let out a happy squeal and clapped her tiny hands together. They both laughed, the tension breaking, and Penelope picked up the baby and held her close. Soon, she whispered to Owen, her eyes making a promise. Very soon. March arrived with all the unpredictability of early spring. One day would be warm enough to suggest winter was over, and the next would bring snow flurries and freezing temperatures. But slowly, steadily, the snow began to melt. The sound of running water filled the air as streams swelled with runoff. Green shoots began to appear in the places where the snow had retreated first. Owen began preparing for the spring roundup, the annual task of gathering the cattle that had scattered during winter and checking them over before driving them to better grazing. It was hard, exhausting work that would require long days in the saddle and at least one night camping out on the range. I will be gone for 3 days, maybe 4, he told Penelope the night before he was due to leave. Jacob will stay here at the ranch with you in case you need anything. The other men and I will handle the cattle. I will be fine, Penelope assured him. Jacob has already shown me how to fire the rifle and I am a decent shot. Nothing will happen. I know, Owen said, though leaving them still made him uneasy. It just feels wrong to go when we have barely had any time together. They were sitting on the porch in the mild evening air, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lily was inside, already asleep in her cradle. It was one of the few moments they had truly alone, without work or the baby needing attention. Owen, Penelope said softly, turning to face him, when you come back, I would like for us to truly be husband and wife. Owen's heart stuttered in his chest. Are you certain? I am certain, Penelope said firmly. I care for you, Owen. I think I am falling in love with you, actually. You have been so patient, so kind. You took Lily and me in when you had every right to refuse us. You have treated me with more respect and consideration than I knew a man could give a woman. I want to be your wife in every way. I am falling in love with you too, Owen admitted, the words coming easier than he expected. I think I have been since the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, looking scared and determined and beautiful all at once. Penelope laughed softly. I looked like a drowned rat. You looked like the answer to a prayer I did not know I had been praying, Owen corrected. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. When I get back, we will make this a real marriage in every sense. I promise you that. He left at dawn the next morning, kissing Penelope and Lily goodbye and trying not to notice how empty the ranch felt as he rode away. The work was consuming, as he had known it would be. The cattle had scattered far during the winter, and rounding them up required riding into every canyon and valley on his property. They found 2 calves that had been born early, both healthy despite the lingering cold, and lost count of the hours they spent in the saddle. At night, camping under the stars with his men, Owen found his thoughts returning again and again to Penelope. To the way she smiled when she looked at him, the way her hand felt in his, the promise in her eyes when she had said she was falling in love with him. He had never expected to feel this way about anyone, let alone a mail-order bride he had known for only 3 months. But the heart did not care about time or logic. It only cared about connection, and the connection between him and Penelope felt as solid and real as the ground beneath his feet. On the 4th day, they finished the roundup and began driving the cattle to the spring grazing areas. Owen left the men to finish the job and rode hard for home, suddenly desperate to see his wife and daughter. The sun was setting when he finally reached the ranch, and he could see smoke curling from the chimney and a light burning in the window. Penelope must have heard the horse because she appeared in the doorway before Owen had even dismounted. She was wearing a dress he had not seen before, a soft green that brought out the color in her eyes, and her hair was loose around her shoulders instead of tied back as usual. "You are home," she said, and the joy in her voice made his chest tight. "I am home," Owen confirmed, crossing the distance between them in quick strides. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, not caring that he was dusty from days on the trail. Penelope kissed him back just as passionately, her arms wrapping around his neck. "I missed you," she whispered against his lips. "I missed you too," Owen said. "Every moment I was gone, I was thinking about you and Lily." "Lily is asleep," Penelope said, and there was meaning in those words in the way she looked up at him through her lashes. "And Jacob is in the bunkhouse." "We are alone." Owen swallowed hard. "Are you sure? I am filthy from the trail." "There is hot water warming by the fire," Penelope said. "I prepared it when I saw you riding in. You can wash and then we can have supper." She paused, her cheeks flushing pink. "And then, if you are not too tired, we can go upstairs." Owen felt heat flood through him at her words, at the promise in her eyes. "I am never too tired for you." He washed quickly, changing into clean clothes while Penelope set out supper, but neither of them had much appetite for food. They sat at the table, making desultory conversation, their eyes meeting and holding, the air between them charged with anticipation. Finally, Owen pushed back his chair and extended his hand. "Come with me." Penelope placed her hand in his without hesitation, and he led her upstairs to his bedroom. He had lit candles while he was changing, and the room glowed with soft light. The bed was made with fresh linens, and someone, Penelope probably, had placed a vase of early spring wildflowers on the dresser. "It is not fancy," Owen said, suddenly nervous. "It is perfect," Penelope assured him. She stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face. "You are perfect." "I am far from perfect," Owen said with a soft laugh, "but I promise I will do my best to be a good husband to you, Penelope. Today and every day for the rest of our lives." "I know you will," Penelope said, "and I promise to be a good wife to you, to stand beside you and work with you and build a life with you." They came together slowly, tentatively at first, learning each other's bodies with gentle hands and soft words. Owen had been with women before, but this was different. This was his wife, the woman he loved, and every touch felt sacred. Penelope was inexperienced but eager, and they found their rhythm together, moving in sync as naturally as they did when working side by side in the kitchen. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the bed, Penelope's head resting on Owen's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. Through the open door, they could hear Lily stirring in the next room, making the soft, sleepy sounds that meant she would wake soon. "I should feed her," Penelope murmured, but she made no move to get up. "In a moment," Owen said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Let me hold you just a little longer." "I love you," Penelope said softly. I know it has not been long, but I do. I love you, Owen. I love you too, Owen said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. You and Lily both. You are my family now, my whole world. Spring arrived in earnest after that, bringing with it an explosion of new life. The meadows turned green and filled with wildflowers. The cattle grew fat on fresh grass. The garden that Penelope planted behind the house began to sprout, neat rows of vegetables pushing up through the dark soil. Lily was growing too, changing almost daily. She learned to sit up on her own, and then to pull herself up on furniture, cruising along the edges of tables and chairs with determination. Her dark baby hair fell out and grew back in lighter, a soft brown with hints of gold. Her eyes changed from murky blue to hazel, flecked with green like her mother Ruth's had been. Owen found himself completely besotted with the little girl. He would spend hours playing with her, building towers of blocks for her to knock down, carrying her around the ranch on his shoulders while he did chores. The ranch hands teased him mercilessly about being wrapped around the baby's tiny finger, but Owen did not care. He had never imagined that fatherhood could feel like this overwhelming combination of love and protectiveness and joy. "You are a natural father," Penelope told him one evening, watching him feed Lily mashed carrots with exaggerated airplane sounds that made the baby laugh hysterically. "I never thought I would be," Owen admitted. "My own father was a good man, but he was not particularly affectionate. I always assumed I would be the same way with my children, but Lily brings something out in me I did not know was there." "She is lucky to have you," Penelope said softly. "We both are." In late April, Penelope confirmed what they had both begun to suspect. She was pregnant. The realization came one morning when she was overcome with nausea while cooking breakfast, barely making it outside before losing the contents of her stomach. "I am sorry," she said weakly when Owen followed her out, holding her hair back. "I do not know what came over me." But Owen knew, and from the look on Penelope's face when she finally looked up at him, she knew too. "You are with child, I think so," Penelope whispered. "Owen, I am sorry. I know it is so soon, and with Lily still so young, I should have been more careful." "Why are you apologizing?" Owen asked, helping her to her feet gently. "This is wonderful news. We are going to have a baby, Penelope, our baby. You are happy about it?" Penelope asked, searching his face. "I am thrilled," Owen said honestly. "I would have been content with just you and Lily for the rest of my life, but to have another child, one we made together, that is a blessing I never dared hope for." Penelope's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. "I am happy too, scared but happy." "We will face it together," Owen promised, pulling her close. "Everything together from now on." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Penelope's morning sickness lasted longer than either of them would have liked. Owen took over more of the cooking in the mornings, producing his usual barely edible results, but Penelope was too sick to care about the quality of the food. By noon each day, she felt better and could resume her normal activities. As her belly began to swell, Owen found himself constantly amazed by the miracle of it. This was his child growing inside her, a life they had created together. He would rest his hand on her stomach in the evenings, feeling the baby move and kick, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude. "Have you thought about names?" Penelope asked one night as they lay in bed together, her back against his chest, his hand spread over her rounded belly. "I have," Owen admitted. "If it is a boy, I would like to name him Marcus after my father, if you agree, of course." "Marcus Thornton," Penelope said, testing the name. "I like it. It is strong." "And if it is a girl?" Owen asked. "I would like to name her Rose," Penelope said quietly. "After neither of our mothers, starting fresh. But also because roses are beautiful and resilient, able to bloom even in harsh conditions, like we are." Rose Thornton, Owen said, and felt his heart swell with love. That is perfect. Summer arrived with long, hot days that made the ranch work exhausting but satisfying. The cattle were thriving, and Owen was able to sell a good portion of the herd at excellent prices, ensuring they would have money to see them through the next winter and beyond. He used some of the profits to make improvements to the ranch house, building an addition that would give them another bedroom and a proper washroom. Lily celebrated her first birthday in July, though the actual date was uncertain. Penelope had guessed based on what Ruth had told her about when the baby was born. They had a small party, just the ranch hands and a few neighbors from nearby farms. Lily ate too much cake and got frosting in her hair, and everyone laughed at her delighted squeals when Owen gave her a wooden rocking horse he had carved himself during the long evenings. "You made this?" Penelope asked, running her hand over the smooth wood in amazement. "My father taught me to carve," Owen said, watching Lily already trying to climb onto the horse despite being too small to really ride it. "I thought it would be a good gift." "It is more than good, it is beautiful," Penelope said, kissing him in front of everyone, not caring who saw. As summer turned to autumn, Penelope's pregnancy advanced into its final months. She was huge now, her belly seeming impossibly large on her small frame, and moving around was becoming difficult. Owen worried constantly, remembering what Penelope had told him about Ruth's difficult pregnancy and death. "I will be fine," Penelope kept assuring him. "Every woman in my mother's family had easy births. Ruth was the exception, not the rule, and I am stronger than Ruth was. I have been doing physical labor all my life. My body is ready for this. I am still sending for the doctor from Oregon City when your time comes," Owen said firmly. "I am not taking any chances." In early October, the pain started. Penelope woke Owen in the middle of the night, her face calm but tight with discomfort. "It is time." Owen leaped out of bed, his heart racing. He sent Charlie riding hard for Oregon City to fetch the doctor, then set about preparing everything Penelope had told him she would need. Clean linens, hot water, towels. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely light the lamps. "Owen," Penelope called from upstairs, her voice strained but steady. "Come here, I need you." He took the stairs 2 at a time and found her sitting on the edge of the bed, breathing through a contraction. When it passed, she looked up at him with a small smile. "You look more terrified than I feel." "I am terrified," Owen admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose you?" "You will not lose me," Penelope said firmly. "I am not leaving you, Owen Thornton. We have too much life left to live together." The doctor arrived just before dawn, a gruff older man named Dr. Harrison who had delivered half the babies in Oregon Territory. He examined Penelope and pronounced everything normal and progressing well. "Should be a few more hours," he said. "First babies usually take their time." But the baby had other ideas. Less than an hour after Dr. Harrison's examination, the urge to push became overwhelming. Penelope gripped Owen's hand so hard he thought she might break bones, but he did not pull away. He stayed beside her, murmuring encouragement, wiping her face with cool cloths, telling her over and over how strong she was, how proud he was of her. When the baby finally emerged with a lusty cry, "Doctor!" Harrison held up the squalling infant with a grin. "It is a boy, a big, healthy boy, Marcus," Penelope gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Our Marcus." Owen could not speak. He was too overwhelmed, staring at the red-faced baby in the doctor's arms, his son, his and Penelope's child. When Dr. Harrison had cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket, he placed him in Owen's arms, and Owen looked down into his son's face and felt his world shift on its axis. "Hello, Marcus," he whispered. "Welcome to the world, son. Your mother and I have been waiting for you." Marcus had Owen's dark hair and what looked like Penelope's nose, though it was hard to tell with babies. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, and Owen fell in love with him in that instant as completely as he had fallen in love with Lily. Doctor Harrison examined Penelope and declared her healthy, tired but fine. "You did well, Mrs. Thornton. Everything looks good. Get some rest now and make sure you eat well while you are feeding the baby. You need to keep your strength up." When the doctor had left, paid handsomely for his services and discretion, Owen climbed carefully into bed beside Penelope, Marcus cradled between them. Lily, who had been with Jacob during the birth, was brought up to meet her new brother. The little girl stared at the baby with wide, curious eyes, then reached out a gentle finger to touch his hand. "Gentle," Penelope instructed softly. "This is your brother Marcus. You have to be very gentle with him because he is just a baby." Lily seemed to understand. She patted the baby's hand carefully, then looked up at Owen and Penelope with a proud smile, as if she had accomplished something amazing. "That is right," Owen said, his throat tight with emotion. "You are a big sister now, Lily. That is a very important job." They spent the rest of the day in bed, all four of them together, dozing and waking in turns. The ranch hands brought food and congratulations, but otherwise left them alone. It was a day outside of time, a perfect bubble of peace and love and new beginnings. "I cannot believe this is my life," Penelope whispered at one point, looking around at her family. Lily asleep against her side, Marcus nursing at her breast, Owen's arm wrapped protectively around them all. "A year ago I was terrified and alone, convinced my life was over. And now I have all of this. A husband who loves me, 2 beautiful children, a home. It does not seem real." "It is real," Owen assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And it is only going to get better. We have our whole lives ahead of us, Penelope. Think of all the things we will do, all the memories we will make." "Tell me," Penelope said, her eyes already drifting closed with exhaustion. "We will watch Lily and Marcus grow up strong and healthy," Owen said softly. "We will teach them to ride and read and be kind to others. We will expand the ranch, build a legacy to pass down to them. We will grow old together, sitting on the porch in our rocking chairs, watching our grandchildren play in the yard. We will live a good life, Penelope. The best life." "The best life," Penelope echoed, and then she was asleep, a small smile on her lips. The months that followed were exhausting but joyful. Caring for a newborn and a toddler while running a ranch was no easy task, but Owen and Penelope managed it together, supporting each other through the sleepless nights and endless demands. Marcus was an easy baby, content to nurse and sleep and watch the world with his dark, serious eyes. Lily was fascinated by her brother, always wanting to help care for him, bringing him toys and blankets and singing him garbled versions of the songs Penelope sang. As winter approached, they prepared carefully, stocking the cellar with preserved vegetables from the garden, smoking meat, and storing grain and other supplies. Owen did not want a repeat of the previous winter, when supplies had run lower than he was comfortable with. This year, they would be ready for anything. On Christmas Eve, they had all the ranch hands over for supper. Penelope had spent days preparing, roasting a goose and making pies and fresh bread. The house smelled amazing, and the men ate with the enthusiasm of people who rarely got home-cooked meals. After supper, they sang carols around the fire while Lily danced and Marcus watched from Owen's arms, his eyes wide and wondering. "This is what life is supposed to be like," Jacob said quietly to Owen at one point in the evening. "Family and friends, good food and warmth." "You have built something special here, boss." "We have built something special," Owen corrected, gesturing around the room to include all the men. "All of us together. This ranch is not just me. It is all of us working toward the same goal." After the men had left and the children were asleep, Owen and Penelope sat together by the dying fire, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Merry Christmas," Owen said softly. "Merry Christmas," Penelope replied. "I have a gift for you." She reached behind the chair and pulled out a package wrapped in brown paper. Owen opened it carefully and found a thick wool sweater, beautifully knitted in a dark blue that matched his eyes. "You made this?" he asked, running his hands over the intricate pattern. "I have been working on it in the evenings when you were out with the cattle," Penelope said. "I wanted to give you something special, something made with my own hands." "It is perfect," Owen said, pulling the sweater on immediately. It fit perfectly, warm and soft. "Thank you, Penelope." "Now your gift to me," she said with a smile. Owen retrieved his own package from the desk drawer where he had hidden it. Penelope opened it and gasped. Inside was a beautiful cameo necklace, the delicate profile carved in ivory against a dark background. "Owen, this is too much." "It is not enough," Owen said, taking the necklace and fastening it around her neck. "Nothing could be enough to express how much you mean to me, how grateful I am that you came into my life. But I saw this in Oregon City and I thought of you, and I wanted you to have it." Penelope touched the cameo reverently, then threw her arms around Owen's neck and kissed him deeply. "I love you so much. Sometimes I feel like my heart cannot hold it all." "I know exactly what you mean," Owen said, holding her close. The years that followed were full and rich. Lily grew into a bright, energetic child who followed Owen around the ranch like a shadow, learning everything she could about cattle and horses and the land. Marcus was quieter, more introspective, but he had a gift with animals that amazed everyone. Even the most skittish horse would calm under his small hands. When Lily was 4 and Marcus was 2, Penelope became pregnant again. This time, she carried twins, though they did not know that until Dr. Harrison examined her late in the pregnancy and heard 2 distinct heartbeats. Owen was beside himself with worry and excitement in equal measure. "Twins," he kept saying, shaking his head in wonder. "2 babies at once. How are we going to manage?" "The same way we manage everything else," Penelope said with a laugh. "Together." The twins, both girls, were born on a warm summer morning. They named them Rose, as they had planned, and Ruth, after Penelope's sister. The ranch hands built cribs and helped expand the house again, adding another bedroom to accommodate the growing family. Life was chaotic with 4 young children, but it was also incredibly full of love and laughter. The house was never quiet, never still. There were always children playing, meals to prepare, laundry to wash, animals to tend. But Owen and Penelope loved every exhausting minute of it. When Lily turned 8, she asked Owen to teach her to read and write better than the basic skills she had picked up from Penelope. Owen converted the small office downstairs into a schoolroom and began teaching not just Lily, but also Marcus, and eventually the twins. Other families in the area heard about the lessons and asked if their children could join. Soon, Owen found himself running a small school, teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, and history to a dozen children from surrounding ranches. "I never imagined I would become a teacher," he told Penelope one evening, watching her mend clothes by the fire. "You are good at it," Penelope said. "The children love you and you make learning interesting for them." "I love it too," Owen admitted. "It feels good to pass on knowledge, to help these children have opportunities I never had." As the children grew older, they took on more responsibilities around the ranch. Lily proved to be an excellent ranch hand, able to rope and ride as well as any of the men. Marcus preferred working with the horses, training them with patience and skill. The twins, who were inseparable, took over the garden and the chickens, turning the vegetable patch into a source of pride and profit. When Owen was 40 and Penelope was 36, they welcomed their fifth and final child, a boy they named Daniel after Lily's biological father. Lily was 14 then, old enough to understand the significance of the name, and she cried when Penelope told her. "You are naming him after my father?" she asked, her voice breaking. "We are," Penelope confirmed. "Because Daniel was a good man who loved your mother, and he should be remembered. You are named Lily after Ruth's favorite flower, and now your brother will carry your father's name." Lily had always known the truth about her parentage. Owen and Penelope had told her when she was 6, explaining gently that Ruth had been her mother, and that Owen had chosen to be her father, which made it just as real as if she had been born to him. Lily had absorbed the information with surprising calm, then announced that Owen was her real father because real fathers were the ones who loved you and took care of you, not just the ones who made you. Over the years, Lily had asked questions about Ruth and Daniel, and Owen and Penelope had answered honestly, sharing memories and stories. But this gesture, naming her baby brother after the man who had given her life, meant more to Lily than any words could express. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging both of her parents tightly. "Thank you for never forgetting where I came from, but also for making me part of this family completely." "You have always been part of this family," Owen said gruffly, his own eyes suspiciously wet. "From the moment you cried in your mother's arms in that snowstorm, you were my daughter. Nothing will ever change that." The ranch continued to prosper. Owen expanded the herd and bought additional land, building one of the most successful cattle operations in Oregon Territory. He earned a reputation for fair dealing and quality stock, and buyers came from as far away as California to purchase his cattle. The money allowed them to make further improvements to the house and the outbuildings, to save for the children's futures, to live comfortably without the constant worry about survival that plagued so many frontier families. Penelope became known throughout the region for her skills as a healer. She had studied the herb gardening book Owen had given her years ago, and expanded her knowledge through experimentation and learning from the native tribes who sometimes passed through the area. People would ride for miles to consult with her about illnesses and injuries, and she treated everyone who came to her door with the same care and compassion, never turning anyone away regardless of their ability to pay. As the children reached adulthood, they began to make their own paths. Lily married a neighboring rancher's son when she was 19, a young man named David who loved her fierce independence and shared her passion for ranching. They built a small ranch of their own 5 miles away, close enough for frequent visits but far enough to be their own separate enterprise. Marcus, who had never been interested in ranching beyond working with the horses, apprenticed himself to a veterinarian in Portland and eventually opened his own practice, becoming the first dedicated animal doctor in the region. He married a quiet school teacher named Sarah, and they had 3 children who spent their summers at the ranch, learning about animals from their grandfather. The twins were more adventurous. Rose became a teacher like Owen had been, opening a proper school in Oregon City that served children from all over the area. Ruth studied medicine under Dr. Harrison and became a midwife, following in Penelope's footsteps in caring for women and babies. Neither of them married, choosing instead to dedicate their lives to their professions, though both had suitors who pursued them hopefully over the years. Daniel, the youngest, fell in love with the land the way Owen had. When he turned 21, Owen deeded him a portion of the ranch to run as his own, keeping the rest to manage himself with Lily and David's help. Daniel was a natural cattleman, with an instinct for breeding and business that exceeded even Owen's considerable skills. And through it all, Owen and Penelope remained the center of the family, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces gaining lines from years of laughter and hard work and weather. But their love never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect and the simple joy of being together. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Owen stood on the porch of the ranch house and looked out over the land that had become his legacy. The house had been expanded and improved so many times it barely resembled the structure his father had built. Barns and outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance, he could see cattle grazing peacefully in lush pastures. Smoke rose from the chimneys of the houses where Lily and Daniel lived with their families. Penelope came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his as naturally as breathing. They had held hands like this 10,000 times, but it still felt as special as it had the first time. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I am thinking about that day you arrived," Owen said softly. "How terrified you looked, standing in that stage office with Lily in your arms. How I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I could not turn you away." "Two blessings came that day," Penelope quoted, smiling at the memory. "That was what you said." "I was right," Owen said. "You and Lily were blessings, and everything good in my life has flowed from that moment. Our children, this ranch, the life we have built. All of it started because you were brave enough to step off that stage with a baby in your arms and take a chance on a stranger. You made it easy to be brave," Penelope said. "You gave me safety and respect and love. You gave Lily a father and a home. You gave me a family when I thought I had lost everything. Of course I fell in love with you. How could I not?" Owen turned to face her, cupping her face in his weathered hands. "I love you, Penelope Thornton. I have loved you every day for 30 years, and I will love you every day for whatever years we have left." "I love you too," Penelope whispered. And then they were kissing, gentle and sweet, a kiss that held 3 decades of devotion and partnership and unshakable commitment. A shout from the yard made them break apart. Lily was approaching with her 3 children. Daniel was walking over from his house with his wife and 2 boys, and in the distance, they could see Marcus's wagon approaching, undoubtedly filled with his family coming for the anniversary celebration. Rose and Ruth had arrived the day before from Oregon City. "Here comes chaos," Penelope said with a laugh, but her eyes were bright with happiness. "Here comes family," Owen corrected, and together they went down the porch steps to greet their children and grandchildren, surrounded by the noise and love and life they had created together. That evening, after a huge dinner and much celebration, after the children were tucked into beds all over the house, and the adult children had returned to their own homes, Owen and Penelope sat in their bedroom, the same room where they had first come together as husband and wife so many years ago. "Do you remember that first night?" Penelope asked, brushing out her long hair, now more silver than brown. "I remember every detail," Owen said, watching her with the same appreciation he had felt as a young man. "I was so nervous. I wanted everything to be perfect for you." "It was perfect," Penelope assured him. "Everything has been perfect, Owen. Even the hard times, even the struggles, they were perfect because we faced them together." "We make a good team," Owen agreed, climbing into bed beside her. Penelope set down her brush and joined him, settling into the curve of his body as naturally as she had done thousands of times before. "We make the best team." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the house settling around them. Somewhere down the hall, one of the grandchildren coughed, and they heard footsteps as one of the mothers went to check. The familiar sounds of home, of family, of life continuing. "Owen," Penelope said softly. "Yes, thank you for everything. For taking a chance on a desperate woman with a baby, for loving us, for building this life with me. I cannot imagine what my world would have been like if you had sent us away that day." Owen tightened his arms around her. "I cannot imagine it either. And I am grateful every single day that I did not. You and Lily walking into my life was the best thing that ever happened to me. Two blessings that came one snowy day and changed everything." "Two blessings," Penelope echoed, and Owen could hear the smile in her voice. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the family and life they had built from that single moment of choice in a stage office 30 years ago. Outside, the Oregon winter wind blew gently, but inside the ranch house, all was warm and peaceful and full of love. The years continued to pass, bringing with them all the joys and sorrows that make up a full life. They lost friends and gained grandchildren. They weathered droughts and harsh winters and economic downturns. But through it all, they had each other, and that made every challenge bearable, every joy more sweet. When Owen was 65, he finally agreed to retire from the more demanding ranch work, turning over full management to Daniel and Lily while he contented himself with consultation and playing with his growing number of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Penelope had already stepped back from her healing work, training younger women to take over her role as the region's herb woman and midwife. They spent their days much as Owen had once predicted, sitting on the porch in rocking chairs, watching the world go by. But they were not idle. Penelope wrote down all her knowledge about herbs and healing in a thick journal that she intended to pass down to Ruth and any other women interested in the work. Owen carved toys for the children and helped teach the older grandchildren to read. On a warm summer evening, when Owen was 70 and Penelope was 66, they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. Lily's oldest son was getting married the next day, and the ranch was full of family and guests preparing for the celebration. "We have been blessed," Owen said, "not for the first time." "We have," Penelope agreed. "So very blessed." She reached over and took his hand, and Owen marveled again at how perfectly her hand fit in his, how natural it felt after all these years. He thought about that terrified young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach with a crying baby in her arms, how she had looked at him with such desperate hope in her eyes. He thought about the moment he had decided to accept her and Lily both, the moment that had changed the course of his entire life. It had been such a simple choice, really. Help someone in need. Show compassion instead of judgment. Take a risk on something that might bring joy instead of playing it safe and remaining alone. But from that simple choice had grown this magnificent life, filled with love and family and purpose. "I would do it all again," Owen said suddenly. "Every single moment, every choice, every hardship. I would do it all exactly the same because it led me here to this moment with you." Penelope turned to look at him, her gray eyes still as beautiful as they had been the first day he had seen them. "So would I. Even the painful parts, even losing Ruth, even all the fear and uncertainty. I would go through it all again because it brought me to you, to this family, to this life." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. From inside the house came the sounds of laughter and music as the family celebrated the upcoming wedding. Children ran through the yard, playing some elaborate game that involved a great deal of shrieking and giggling. A dog barked in the distance, and someone called for supper to be served. "We should go in," Penelope said, but neither of them moved. In a moment, Owen said, let me sit here with you just a little longer, counting my blessings. So they stayed, hand in hand, rocking gently in their chairs, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Two blessings that had arrived on a snowy December day in 1867 and changed everything. Two people who had chosen love over fear, compassion over convenience, family over solitude. As the stars grew brighter overhead and the sounds of celebration filled the air around them, Owen Thornton looked at his wife and smiled, knowing without a doubt that he was the luckiest man in Oregon territory. And Penelope smiled back, her heart full to overflowing with the same knowledge. They had been given a rare and precious gift, the gift of true love and a full life together. And they had honored that gift by living it completely, holding nothing back, giving everything to each other and to the family they had created. In the end, that was all anyone could ask for, all anyone could hope for. A life well lived, a love well shared, a family well raised. And as they finally rose from their rocking chairs and went inside to join their family, both of them knew that their story would continue long after they were gone, carried forward in the hearts and lives of their children and grandchildren and all the generations to come. A story that had begun with two blessings arriving on a snowy day and had grown into a legacy of love that would last forever.